Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Disruptions Dialogues podcast, where we will explore the intersection of technology, innovation, and the way organizations operate in today's digital world. I'm Karina Quinn, your host for this episode, and today we're talking about a topic that often flies under the radar but plays a critical role for nonprofits, government agencies, and foundations alike, such as grant-making operations. Specifically, how these processes are evolving in the cloud era and what it really takes to modernize them without overwhelming your teams. So joining me for this conversation are Chris Beckford, our President and CEO of eTRANSERVICES, and Jamie Neel, our Program Manager of Digital Services. So they will be sharing their insights from their work with organizations looking to simplify and enhance their grant management through digital solutions. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Jamie, welcome to the podcast. Since you are a new guest speaker here, why don't you go ahead and give us a little introduction about yourself and your experience in grants management and working with digital solutions?
Sure. Thanks, Karina. I'm Jamie Neel, and I am the Program Manager of Digital Services. And I have about 18 years of experience in IT project program management. About 10 years of that has been in grants management implementation. So as a project manager, as a solution designer, as a business analyst, as a configuration specialist, as a QA specialist, you name it. So over the last 10 years, working with products such as Smart Simple and Flux, I have led more than 20 grants management implementation projects and supported more than 30 grant-making organizations, different organizations, in their grants management efforts. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. Sure. And Chris, I know you've been a speaker in all of our podcasts, but for anyone that's new here, do you want to also give or introduce yourself again?
Sure. I'm Chris Beckford, CEO of eTRANSERVICES, and my background is managing and trying to build a company called eTRANSERVICES. Prior to that, I spent just a little bit of time, maybe about 23 years of it, in the Marine Corps, doing all manners of things. And we are here to talk with Jamie about grants management.
Awesome. Yep, and that we are. So to kind of set the stage for the conversation, why don't we talk about the current state of grant making operations? So why, and this question goes out to either one of you, so feel free to answer. So why do you think grant making operations have been slow to adopt modern digital solutions compared to other areas like finance or HR?
So grant making organizations, especially your smaller nonprofit organizations, I guess they tend to shy away from digital solutions like a full-blown grants management system, usually because of budget limitations or sometimes lack of staff or technical expertise that they have in-house. So configurable grants management systems like a Smart Simple do require some amount of technical expertise. You don't have to be, a developer, but some amount of that technical expertise and also a financial commitment to implement and maintain a system. There are some less costly, sort of more out-of-the-box solutions out there that are grants management specific, but they're definitely not as flexible in terms of functionality and customization as something like Smart Simple. And so that may work for smaller organizations or those that really don't have like a complex business process or review process or compliance reporting needs. But it is still sort of overwhelming to know where to start if you're not used to working with that type of technology. And so I think for some of those smaller grant making organizations, it's just a daunting task because it's like They don't know what to start with. They don't know, how to plan. Sometimes they don't have the in-house staff to even do a technical evaluation of different tools. So I think it's just overall just it's a daunting process.
Sometimes it's like Jamie said, they don't know what's out there.
Mhm.
Or even if they do have a solution like a Smart Simple that provides them some level of customization and flexibility, uh, they may have implemented something years ago and that's all they know. It works for them.
Yeah.
They've learned to augment around the system and its capabilities and are really not taking full advantage of all the capabilities of the product. And I think that's where we provide value added consulting services as eTRANSERVICES. We're able to help those that are looking for a solution to use a solution that has been proven, and those that have the solution and they may be using Smart Simple for 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, but they truly haven't maximized the capability of it, and they don't know where to turn to get the level of professional services, hand holding, somebody to really help them exploit the capabilities what's out there, and that includes also sit with them and think through the possibilities, and end up with a solution that they would really like to implement. And that's what our real value added capability is.
Yeah, I think I agree with all those points, Chris. We have clients that have been using either Smart Simple, as Chris said, for 10 years, and they just haven't explored what all it can do. Or we've had clients in the past where they had a grants management system that they built, 15, 20 years ago that is now being sunsetted. So it's sort of like they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place, if you will, on what do we do next? Because this product isn't going to be supported anymore. And so they have to move to something else. And just trying to evaluate what's out there, pick the right tools, figuring out what all these systems can do for them is kind of overwhelming.
And since you both have mentioned Smart Simple, for any listeners that aren't familiar with Smart Simple, could you kind of describe what it is and why it has been valuable in these transformation efforts?
Yeah, Smart Simple is it's a no-code, low-code platform. It's traditionally geared toward grant management. So it has modules that support programs, budgets, application intake, review, but it's also highly customizable. So in essence, it's a business process automation tool. It has a powerful workflow engine. It's easy to integrate traditional grants management features with other business processes because it's so flexible. It's easy to integrate with other tools as well. So you can integrate with business intelligence tools or electronic signature tools or things like that. It's a really, really powerful tool. It is highly customizable. It's highly flexible. You can use it for things other than grants management, like project management, task management, stakeholder engagement, pretty much anything you can dream up that needs to be tracked. You can build it in that system. So it's not just for grants.
And we've maximized, I think, the capability of Smart Simple as a tool, and we even have a version of it that we use in the U.S. marketplace called UD Pass, and primarily focused on the federal government clients using it. And we do have some that have used it and have enjoyed it. But I think the true value here is what Smart Simple bring to the table. And outside of building a solution from scratch, it's one of the more adaptable tools that are out there in the market that has a pretty good following. And that level of following and flexibility enable us to provide or combine the capabilities of the tool with our consulting services to add a lot of value to organizations while they want to do their job as a grant management organization, but they also want to reduce that IT burden or transfer it so somebody else can take care of it. And that's what we do exceptionally well.
Awesome. And you both mentioned Smart Simple being a no-code, low-code platform. So how are no-code and low-code approaches actually being used to simplify grant management workflows?
Actually, low code is a more appropriate term for a product like Smart Simple. Kind of at its core, the product functions as separate modules that integrate together. And you can do that with just standard and custom fields in that standard core functionality. And then that you would have nothing but configuration. But in reality, you really can't maximize the capabilities of something like Smart Simple without doing a little bit of coding. Whether it's adding like custom visibility conditions on fields or a little HTML here and there to make nice looking PDFs. A lot of grants management products are low code. They still require some customization and a little bit of coding to make the system unique to that grant making organization. So I don't think anything is ever going to be completely no code. If it is, it won't have the flexibility of a product like Smart Simple because you're still a little bit boxed in by the features and the capabilities of that no code system.
I think even the most uh, low code platform, as Jamie said, still has a level of coding and especially when you want to reach the area of highly customized, that's where you really get to the point where you need some level of familiarity with coding. But and maybe the term better for Smart Simple is configuration, because you're not really doing any coding until you want to highly customize something.
Yep,
But
that's true.
you do have to have a lot of knowledge on how the platform works, the syntaxes associated with it, in order to properly configure it. And that configuration uh, does not necessarily mean you're building something from scratch. You also have to, your configuration skills require a level of architecting. What do you put in first? Then what do you do second? And based on, Jamie used a term earlier called modules. And what you want to do with those modules. How do you want those modules to relate to each other? That's the value of the initial architecting before you configure. So that eliminates almost the need for any type of coding. By properly architecting and then configuring, you really don't use any code. But when you get to highly customized, especially on the front end where I want my logo, I want my branding, that's where I think the low code come into play. And I think that's where a lot of organization, they want their branding seen by those that are using their GMS or grant management solution. And that's something that is extremely valuable to most organizations and to others that use grant management systems overall.
The other part of coding that comes into play is that interoperability between those modules. So two different modules in the system talk to each other, and there is an inherent connection in the system that you can configure. But if you want to get data from one module to the other for whatever reason, reporting or other things, there has to be some amount of coding in order to do that. You're not writing a full-blown, script. It's just, like Chris said, syntax, to get, the piece of data that you need to be represented from one module to the other. So, but it's code, if you want to use that term.
Gotcha. So now are you able to share an example of a grant making project where our approach or solutions made a significant difference?
Sure. Yeah, we have one client that we've worked with for years. And we have done some pretty exciting work with them beyond sort of the grant making aspect of Smart Simple. For one, we built them an event management module. So that allows them to not only manage events, meetings and things like that they have internally, but also they have an event space that they allow local nonprofit community and also their grantees to use for meetings and trainings and other events that they want to hold at this space. And so what we built was a system where they could book the event space through Smart Simple and an integration to a calendar on their website. So that was pretty fun. For that same client, we also built an integrated visualization dashboard that gives them an insight into some outcome metrics, survey data, and then other key data points that allow them to see and report out to their board, to their grantees, to the greater community at hand. They create sort of a book every year that they can publish that has all of their statistics, all of their metrics, program outcomes, survey results, all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty exciting. We've had a lot of fun with that.
Awesome. And with this specific grant making project, did you have any unexpected challenges that, the digital service team was able to overcome?
Yeah, so for that dashboard that I was talking about, just trying to aggregate like 20 or 30 data points from various sources in the system. So this is where we come back to, like, there's a little bit of coding, right? Because you're trying to get data from all over the system and aggregate it together. So we were taking data from like progress reports and grantee surveys and data that staff collected for various reasons from all different parts of the system and aggregating them up into this visualization board. So what we had to do is come up with a consistent set of queries that can be replicated with just slight parameter changes. That makes it easier to add a new data point, let's say, and just, kind of save the query and change the parameter slightly, and then you can get the data from that particular thing as well. It makes it repeatable. It makes it easier to maintain that dashboard going forward too. So we have it to the point where staff, can kind of do it as well, and not have to write code or anything like that. Just, change the reporting parameters. So that was a little bit challenging though, because like I said, there were so many different data points that we had to integrate. And then, for the event space, like I said, we had to integrate with a calendar on the client's website. So that was kind of a challenge because we did not build their website. So we were able to work with the team that developed their website calendar. And we did create an interface to that calendar, so you can go to the calendar and you can click on a particular date and see if the room in that event space is booked. And if it is available, then you can block it for a certain period of time. And then that will actually send that reservation into Smart Simple and book the room. And then it's immediately viewable back again into that calendar for other people to see that it actually has been booked. So it's pretty cool. We had a good time building that one as well.
Awesome. And not necessarily from this specific grant making project, but maybe others as well. Do you have any lessons learned that others could possibly benefit from when embarking on a similar transformation?
Biggest lesson learned is probably just preparation. This particular client that I mentioned we have worked with for quite a few years now is extremely organized. So they had all of their key data points and data sources worked out ahead of time, which made it easier for us to work with them and decide how we were going to build out the dashboard. So preparation, I think, in that area was key. Most grant making organizations really know and understand their data needs much better than we as consultants do. We have a lot of experience with grant making organizations and with the grant management process. So we understand the data, but individual grant making organizations understand their data and what they're trying to get out of it. So they really understand their metrics and their KPIs. They really understand their outcomes that they're trying to measure. They really have a good insight into their compliance reporting needs and things like that. So preparation on the client side, so the grant making organization side, is key for us when we go into that sort of implementation, because the more prepared and the better they understand what it is they're trying to achieve, the easier it is for us to assist them in that process.
Jamie, so what would be, on a high level, the onboarding process for an organization who is listening to this and they're interested in using Smart Simple and our consulting service?
Generally, when we onboard a client, we go through a process we call discovery. So we spend a couple of weeks just interviewing the clients, interviewing them about their current processes and what they're currently using to capture data. Some clients, brand new ones, are using spreadsheets to track grants. And some clients are using emails and fillable PDF forms or even Word documents that they send to prospective grantees, so that they can get, like their application is basically in a Word document. And so it's important for us to understand what they're currently doing. It's important for us to understand what their entire process is from start to finish. Like, how do they advertise a funding opportunity? And how do they, how do they get their applications out there to prospective grantees? And then how do they collect them, and how do they evaluate them, and who reviews them, and then what is their decision-making process? And so when we start with a brand new client that's looking to implement something like Smart Simple, we go through that process and we map out all of their business processes, and we talk through every single scenario, and we try to help them streamline that process so that when it comes to transforming that into a system process, it's a lot easier to talk to that business process and take it to technical requirements. So we spend, I don't know, it depends on the client and the size of what their implementation might be and what all they're trying to achieve, but several weeks of multiple meetings, just kind of going through all that stuff and documenting it, and then we build requirements from that. Yeah, and then we work on the implementation, and that's a whole different process.
So how valuable is that time spent getting to know that client, their processes, and building a relationship with them to the delivery of an end product?
Oh, it's extremely valuable. So number one, we really get to know the client, and we really get to work with them on a daily basis. They are part of the team. And then as we go into implementation, they really become part of the implementation team. So it's like a lengthy interview process for a job, if you will, on both sides, really. I mean, we're sort of interviewing for the job of implementer, if you will, but we're also sort of interviewing that client in terms of how are we going to work together, and how much of this effort are we building out? Sometimes clients come in with the technical skills to do some of the implementation, and they want to do that. And so we talk about, sharing that responsibility and allowing them to have some buy-in and some control over that implementation process as well. But it's extremely important to do that discovery process, because it gets us really, really kind of baked into their terminology and their process and their stakeholders and their grantee populations and their programs. So we really, really get a sense of who that client is, and how we can help them.
So when we do that process, when we uh, um, at the conclusion of that onboarding process of understanding what their requirements truly are, and what it looks like, or what their needs are, um, uh, and it's time to um, implement or build the solution. Um, are we using the same team or a different team to do the implementation from those that capture the requirements and sat in on their meetings?
That's a good question. It's usually the same team plus. So we start with a smaller team, business analysts, project manager, kind of just gathering all that documentation, documenting all those processes, getting the requirements solidified. And then we keep that same team, and we bring in additional, configuration specialists and developers and integration specialists if needed, other, data migration specialists, as needed, depending on what that project is going to look like. So it's the same team plus some additional resources.
And what's the overall value to success of keeping the same team working with the client, besides relationships are being built, and they're familiar with what the beginning processes are, or
I think,
problems or challenges are?
yeah, I think it's continuity. I mean, if you keep the same, sort of core team throughout the process, then you have that shared experience of discovery. Everybody kind of remembers, the discussion that we had 3 weeks ago where we talked about this specific process, and then we can augment that. Whereas if you bring in a brand new team to do an implementation that was not part of that discovery process, there's a learning curve. So you are repeating, or having the team relearn something that your initial team already learned. And there's a lot more ramp up time. And I think that ends up costing more in the end, because, your new team has to basically get up to speed.
Okay.
And you get a better product, I think.
Let's talk about the personal benefit there, in this. From a leadership perspective, what's your most rewarding experience in building a solution, a grants management solution?
I think just like finally getting to the point where the system is live, to me, is so cool, because it's like you start with, a diagram or, a Word document of somebody's idea, and then you see it all the way through to, here is a cool working system that has all these bells and whistles. It does what this client, it's meeting their expectations, it's exceeding their expectations in a lot of cases. And to be able to get to that point in, a few short months is pretty rewarding in and of itself, just because, they start with nothing, or they start with a bunch of spreadsheets and some Word documents, and then we transform that into, the system where everybody has, the ability to collaborate with each other. Everybody has the ability to see, some of that data visualized. You can give insight into upper management levels. So they just get like a quick overview of what is our grant process, or what is our, what does our grant spending look like for the year, or something like that. Where they didn't have that before, or they had to dig through, 10 spreadsheets and run a bunch of reports or something like that just to get that data. Now they have a system where they can just log in, do a quick check, and get that information. So I think that's the most rewarding part of it for me, is just starting from nothing and building something that works and makes life easier for that grant making staff.
Give me two things that grants management organizations should plan for that they don't plan for.
So this is something that comes up again and again that I've seen with clients in recent years, is that when you're planning to implement a grants management system, you have to be somewhat flexible in terms of your business processes. And the reason I say that is because I've had clients come in before and they say, well, we have 5 different grant programs and each of them works differently. And they all have a different application, and they all have a different review process, and they all have a different award process, or some of them are different and some of them are the same, or we have different funders that have different requirements, let's say. So you have to, the best thing to do when you're coming into that situation, when you're coming into building a new grants management system, is to start with strip everything down to like, what are the things that are all the same about these different processes and these different programs? What are the common elements of that? And get those built first. And then you can add the bells and whistles or the different permutations of each of those grant programs, each of their specific requirements for reporting or funding or something like that. But to try to streamline it and distill it down to like the common elements first, so that you get the basic functionality of the system. And then I think the other thing, trying to go back to what your question was, the other thing is just be prepared. Get as much documentation as you can coming into that discovery, and really look at that first before we engage with you, or at least be familiar with it and understand how your process works, because what we don't want to do is waste your valuable time as a client, and we want to make sure that when we do that discovery process, it's as efficient and effective as possible.
All right, so before we move on to a new topic, Chris or Jamie, do you have anything else you'd like to add on how our digital services team has helped organizations rethink their grant operations?
The only thing I'll add is that, as I mentioned before, what I'm seeing now in a lot of these clients that we work with is a trend towards simplifying. I've got several clients who, like I said, when they first started out, when we first built their systems out, or when someone else built for them, they would have 12 different grant programs, 12 different application types, a bunch of different requirements that were specific to each one. And I have seen now a trend towards that commonality, so making a common application that has a core set of fields on it, let's say a core set of questions that they ask every single grantee, regardless of the program, regardless of, what the requirements are for reporting, et cetera. And then they, tweak it so that for this program, we're going to ask a couple of specific questions. And for this program, we're going to ask some different questions. But trying to get to a common process and a common application is a big trend. And we've been able to support that with Smart Simple because of the way that the system works, with the ability to control the application functionality based on how you define it on each program. So we call that our business rules And so we apply those business rules on a program, and then that sort of carries forward into the application. And it makes it a lot more easy for, instead of doing a lot of new configuration every year, it makes it easier to add a new program by just saying, I'm going to just build that same common application for this new program, but I have some very specific questions I'm going to add. Instead of configuring them, the staff just has to select, certain parameters on that program, and then voila, it's just, kind of on the application, because of magic. No, because of the way we configure the system.
Thank you. All right. So looking ahead into the future of grant making in the cloud era, how do you see the role of cloud-based platforms evolving in the grant making space over the next few years?
I think the big thing that I'm seeing now and probably looking forward is better visualization of data. Impact measurement is definitely something that grant makers are interested in doing and putting much more emphasis on. Having that instant insight into metrics is going to be key moving forward. And I think that data visualization is going to be a lot more important. It's not only important to be able to just, log in and check, what's the current state of things, but also, to provide that to other stakeholders, so funders and board members and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that you have that nice visualized data. So Smart Simple has some built-in dashboard capability that's pretty flexible and pretty cool, but also we can integrate with other business intelligence tools like Tableau. And that's pretty powerful too, because you can do all kinds of interesting things with your data. As long as you can, report on it, you can make it look really neat in those business intelligence platforms. So that's, I think, one thing that I'm seeing a lot more of. When we first started, there wasn't a lot of that sort of visualization. It was more just get the applications in, get them reviewed, get them awarded, and get them reported on. But now we're looking at impacts, and that's going to be huge going forward.
I see one of the things that I think is going to be evolving is using those grants management solutions, but ensuring that there is better or more advanced identity and access management, because that data, it is the new currency. And it needs to be protected. So to get to what Jamie's talking about, the value, the credibility of the data must be extremely, it has to be beyond reproach. So the identity and access management, the cybersecurity for the systems, they're evolving, but they need to reach beyond the current acceptable norms right now. SOC 2, maybe that's not good enough anymore, and that's good if the data is being stored, and it's good, but on the front end, and that's where the consulting services come in. Let's talk about passkeys, multi-factor authentication to get into the system, to protect that data. And that's something that as the cloud and cloud computing and AI evolve, the use of AI is going to be a reality. Some of those metrics and reporting that Jamie's talking about, that's going to be coming from machine learning and AI capability, basically looking at trends and patterns and then making recommendations. I think this is where that evolution is going. And there are going to be probably more players in the grant space building other applications to make data more valuable to the individual organizations, almost like niche markets. So just like it's happening in the rest of the commercial world, grant data is no different. If you're funding I'll just use an example, a soup kitchen. Um, okay, where exactly is that soup kitchen? Now, organizations want to access the logs, get, you know, how many people are actually going there, how it's being used, the value to society, the complementary capabilities between services being provided by grant making organization, the states, the federal government. That natural convergence is going to happen as budgets are become more restrictive.
I think also Chris mentioned AI. This is definitely something that we've seen as a trend, or at least an ask from our clients in the last couple of years, as is everywhere. You see AI is basically making making an appearance everywhere. But I think we have to be careful about AI as it applies to grants management systems as well. We can use it for things like evaluating applications for plagiarized content or AI generated content, looking at basic compliance and eligibility matches, or summarizing application content for a board meeting or something like that. But we don't want to rely on it solely for the review and recommendation process. We still need like a human element for that decision making. So I think it's a delicate balance between using AI for its utility and using it to, replace some of those functions that, grant making organizations already are doing with, human evaluators, human reviewers.
Yeah.
So we just need to be careful about how we use it.
There's limited resources out there, whether it's at the federal, the state, within private databases, and therefore those are thousands of grant making opportunities and beneficiaries. And where AI come in with the right criteria, with the right knowledge, with the right input, being able to narrow that down. The human perspective can't be replaced, but when you have thousands and thousands of applications that need to be sorted and vetted, there's going to be cost cutting measures. And that's where I think AI is going to come in. It's going to narrow things down. It's going to give you the short list, and if you're on the side of benefiting from the grants, your personalized alerts. Um, if you're, really relating to the actions that are necessary, or if you're writing grants, the capability of being alerted that if there's there are granting opportunities released by various federal, state, private organizations. It's a niche market, and I think there's a lot of work for AI to do in that space. And that's a future that it's coming. It's not here right now, but it's coming.
And probably really quickly.
All right. So for organizations just beginning to modernize their grant processes, what other advice would you give them?
I would say start with the basics. So what is your process? What does your application look like? Do you have a standard set of questions you ask all of your grantees? I always recommend, like, when adopting a new grants management platform, just to make sure you have that, I think I mentioned it earlier, that common or generic application form that works for all programs, and then whatever those exceptions happen to be, that are program specific. And then once you have, your process and your forms, you can start identifying those exceptions and building those into the process as well. The thing is, if you go into starting a new grants management platform build, let's say, and you as the grant making organization don't have, that insight into how you do things, or even an eye for improving how you do things, it's going to take longer to implement, and it's going to cost more, because the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost. So the more prep you can do as a client organization ahead of time, to really understand what it is you're looking for from that system, what it is that you currently are doing, and how you're doing it, the easier the implementation process is going to be, both for you and for us as the implementer, because all that prep work, is going to make the process shorter. And that discovery period that we talked about earlier is going to be easier because you already have all the documentation. And then coming into it again with that sense of, we can make changes. It's okay. It's not gonna, it's not gonna hurt anything if we change, streamline, adopt new ways of doing things. So yeah, I think there also has to be that openness and willingness to change as well. Not that we're going to force you into a new process, but like just trying to make everything as streamlined as possible, because when you're taking an ad hoc process outside of a system and putting it into a structure of a grants management system that has process, that has workflow, that has specific form fields and data that you're collecting, you do have to standardize. So you have to be willing to adapt.
Sometimes organizations are so rigid as far as, this is what we do and this is how we do it. But maybe there's room to optimize or to do something better, by allowing the right consulting teams to go through their process, because through that discovery, you may learn something that you didn't anticipate, you didn't plan for. And the last thing you want to do is take your existing system, put it into a more move it into the cloud, and all you did was pick up exactly what you're doing before and move that into the cloud, or build some chat box to do exactly the same.
Yeah.
Without
I've actually had
opportunity.
clients want to do that, where they had an old system that was being sunset, and they were like, just rebuild it, just take this and put it over here. And it's like, well, what's the point,
And there's a missed
How about
opportunity
improve it?
cost.
Yeah.
There's a missed opportunity cost there of just making yourself, just being able just want just the ability to just sit back and just listen. And maybe your work, or the amount of work that you're doing, would actually be easier, lighter, by adapting new processes, techniques, procedures. And a lot of that come from just listening to, although you may not want to listen, sometimes it may be value added to just listen sometimes, get a different perspective.
Well, the whole reason you're adopting a grants management platform to begin with is to make your life, as a staff of a grants organization, to make your lives easier, right? You want to be able to streamline, you want to be able to automate, you want to be able to, collapse or condense some steps in your process. You want to be able to not do things manually anymore. You want to be able to collaborate with other people on your team. So you have to be able to change the way that you currently are doing business, in order to make use of those tools and get value from your grants management system.
Awesome. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
I mean, I think we kind of talked through everything. I think the thing is just, again, keeping in mind that if you're gonna, if you're working with a tool like Smart Simple, we're trying not to build like a colossus, if you will. It is flexible and it's a great tool and it has the ability to do all kinds of wonderful things, but in the end, you don't want to be left with a system that's so burdensome and hard to maintain, that it ends up costing you in the long run. So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing that we just talked about, which is just flexibility and being open to adapting new tools and new processes as you go.
That brings us to the end of today's conversation on transforming grant-making operations in the cloud era. A big thank you to Chris and Jamie for sharing their insights and real-world experiences with us. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, please follow the podcast and share it with your network. And as always, if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you, our listeners. So until next time, take care and stay curious.